post-combat, now entering second main phase.
Hello and welcome in everybody to the second main phase competitive Magic the Gathering podcast brought to you by Team Main Phase and our wonderful sponsors, the Mana Vault and Kangaroo Tales. My name is Jason and I'm joined as always by my good buddy Doug. Doug, how's it going today?
It's been a fun couple 72 hours.
It's been a few hours for sure. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. 2 new vet bills were expensive.
I did. I knew that. I could have told you that.
Oh,
Yeah,
you didn't
sorry.
tell me that.
Sorry,
I should have
that was my bad. I should have let you know that. That's on me, honestly.
That was poor comms. Poor comms.
Yeah.
But we're back after our little hiatus. We needed a little break. Not from the podcast, just from Magic in general. It's been kind of a rough grind for the past, year and a half, 2 years that we've been on this journey. And, you can only take so much without, losing some of your patience, fortitude, spirit, money. We needed a reset. We were like, I to speak for myself, I was starting to lose a little bit of the love for the game. I was starting to lose a little bit of my my trust in the game, and I needed to take a step back and really reassess and get some good R&R. We're back, baby.
Yeah, the burnout's real. I mean, when you're as focused and kind of going as hard and as many hours, as much, this is, not some kind of slight hobby. I mean, it is, right? There is a certain hobby aspect of it, I guess, but this really is like a second job where the amount of hours and time and effort we put into this, and I would put an emphasis on effort because there really is a lot of effort and a lot of things that we do as a team in the testing. And yeah, there's just going to inevitably be burnout. You can work through it a lot of times, but sometimes you just kind of get to the end of the line there where you just really need to take a nice break. And that's kind of where we were. So glad to be back though.
Yeah, I mean, also because we started doing guides, and that takes a lot of work because you gotta work matchups. You gotta have 200, 300, 400, 500 games under your belt, and really know what you're talking about and edit, and then taking the podcast. It is a fun thing that we do, but it's also work. We have to make a script, edit, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, it felt like we were having 3 jobs. At least I felt like I had 3 jobs, and then it was a little rough, but we're refreshed, we're rejuvenated.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. We did add stuff on top of the kind of rigorous schedule we already had, right? So now we've kind of rebalanced, refocused, feeling good, ready to look forward.
Yeah. I think a lot of it was just trying to rebalance our work balance kind of thing, trying to find our mojo again. And we're ready. We're gonna get through this RSQ season together.
Yep. So we're going to be looking forward to a little bit of modern, keep talking about kind of what's currently in front of us right now. But of course, before we get to that, we got a very important mailbag question for this week.
It's a main phase mailbag. You got questions, we got answers. Main phase mailbag. It's a main phase mailbag. Ding. Copyright denied.
We'll keep working on it. They're not going to get us with this copyright. It's going to happen.
No, we're going to fight through the courts.
So this week's question, another one from Twitter. I will never call it X. Don't make me say that.
Mm-hmm.
What should I be looking for when choosing my modern deck for this season? Kind of a lot. I think we can look through. It's kind of a lot they're asking here, and kind of a pretty simple question. Where do you want to start, Doug?
So I actually have 2 answers to this question. They may not be satisfying, but I think they're true questions. So really got to ask yourself, what are you trying to do this RSQ season? Are you trying to get a quick qual, or are you trying to grow your skills as a Magic player? Or even just grow your skills in the modern format. So if your answer is I'm trying to qual now, I think the fastest way is just pick a tier 1 deck, learn the matchups, maybe get a sideboard guide, and just hit at it, right? So like energy, pick up affinity. If you're been playing Aim of Titan for a while, play Aim of Titan. Play Esper Blink, or an Eldrazi flavor, like something that you think that you'll like, that you'll like, that you'll be able to put in the work with, and just learn the matchups and play the RSQ easy peasy. But I think there's another way you could play RSQs. And that's just to try to learn, right? Get yourself out of the comfort zone. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people, including some of our own teammates, like to pigeonhole themselves into playing a certain play style. And I don't think it's not a bad thing, but I think it can limit your growth potential in the game for sure. Sometimes a new
Hmm.
perspective of Magic can really help you grow as a Magic player. One thing I encourage you to do this season is pick up a deck that you normally don't play. Let's say, for example, during Standard, you just played Is It Prowess, right? You just played aggro. Every time there's a Standard, every time there's Modern, you play aggro. Maybe try playing like Blue White Control and learning how that sequences, right? Maybe you're like a mid range player, you love the grind. Maybe try playing a combo deck. Maybe pick up Storm or Brood Scale or something of that nature, right? Just put yourself in a different seat, and you'll find that you'll pick up things that you didn't think were possible. You'll
Yep.
be able to, like, if you're not good at combat, you'll put yourself in situations that you have to learn how to do combat math. Put your situations on resource management, playing controller or combo. It just picking up some aspect of the game can also help you if you play your normal, type of Magic, right? Like, because if you're still gonna play aggro, that's great. But now you play control, you kind of know how they think. You know how they sequence their card draw, sequence like how they're gonna play their turns. That gives you insight on sideboarding and things of that nature. Yeah, so I would either play tier one deck if you're trying to queue. If you're not, get in the grind and learn something new.
Yeah, I think it's kind of awesome that I'm right in the same step with you here. The first thing I think of is what is our objective? Are we trying to, like you said, I need to get a qualification. Okay, then we can go through that list of what is the thing that gives me the most likely way to qualify, and there's a couple different ways to approach that. Or is my objective learning, improving, working on some of these other skills like you've outlined? Once you know which direction you need to go, you kind of got this like decision tree that you go through. If it's I need a qualification, okay, what do you think is the best deck? What do you think is happening in your metagame in your local store? You probably have a pretty good idea what your friends or what, the people in your area are playing. Hey, nobody's really ready for Storm. I don't really know Storm. I'm not used to playing Storm. Doesn't matter. Like if you just show up with Storm and you kind of sideswipe everybody and they're not ready for it, that can give you a really big chance to spike an event, right? Maybe it's not the best win percentage deck. Like I think it is a good deck on the side note, but maybe what this deck that you're selecting could be just a very like I win a lot of die rolls, I'm going to win a lot of games, basically kind of thing. Just a high variance kind of deck choice. That's one way to sort of approach it. Or you could go with something that's closer to that 50-50. Well, I don't really have any bad matchups. And so if I sideboard correctly, if I play correctly, you can pick one of those two roads that fits your strengths or your knowledge of modern or your knowledge of the decks. And then on the other side of that, where you're, like you said, if you're trying to learn, you're trying to improve, you're trying to work on some of those different skills like that, there's, you can follow that decision tree there through that way. So this kind of depends on what your objective is. And I think that's the first thing you kind of have to be honest with yourself is what do I trying to achieve? What is my goal here? Very goal focused, and if it's, we even talked about this on a previous episode. So I would encourage, listeners to kind of go back and check out some of that with once you know what your goal is, all right, how do I select a deck from there? What is some of that criteria?
Yeah,
You did a good job outlining that in the previous episode. So I take a listen to that and use that kind of a starting point for you.
yeah, 100%. I definitely think that it's not like, okay, maybe saying this is not correct, but getting an RSQ invite is not the toughest thing in the world, right? There's plenty of opportunities. If you fail in the first part of the season, don't fret. It's a very long season. You got this. And maybe like you can switch goals in the middle, right? Let's say you wanted to learn and it's not going well for you, but you need the invite, then just play what you know that, and if it's
Yeah.
meets the deck choice criteria, see earlier episode C, then yeah, I would just play what you're comfortable with. If you're trying to get that invite. Me personally, I already have my invites, so I'm just playing, just trying to help
Trying new
some
stuff.
friends. Yeah, I've never been known as a combo guy, so I've been getting out of my comfort zone and playing a lot of brute scale and trying
Hmm.
the different the mono green and the green red version of brute scale, and that's been pretty fun. And it's definitely also a frustrating thing because I keep finding myself going back to my same habits, not using the same resource management as I would playing control. So it's been very eye opening on some of the things I was messing up on in the beginning of playing the deck for sure.
Yep. One other important thing when you're trying to figure out what your game plan for all of this is know what weekends you're going to have to go play these events. Right. I only have 3 or 4 weekends, or I have 10 or something. That might influence what your goal or your objective is, and so have that kind of in the back of your mind too. That could help
Yeah, that's a
pick
good
which
point. So
direction you got to go. Yeah.
I see. I was being selfish because I'm just like every weekend I'm off, so huzzah! But you're right. Some
Hmm.
people work on weekends. That's a very good point, Jason.
Yep.
Sometimes, oh,
Availability is important.
some people have boyfriends and girlfriends and family and have to do weekends with other
Kids and
people,
such. Hey,
kids and
sometimes you have pets that
such.
you have to take to the emergency room and you have to pay X-rays.
$700 and there was nothing wrong with her.
You just got to find
Goodness.
out. Yeah.
You know what? I'm glad she's happy and healthy. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah. That's all you can ask for. All right. So moving past our mailbag, let's jump into some modern. That's what the people are here for. We've had
Mhm.
this hiatus. All we want to do is talk about modern. What do we want to
Yep.
start with? Probably a good place to start is let's kind of take a peek at where modern's been at, what's kind of been happening since the bans.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're about a month out from the bannings, and the meta really hasn't changed a ton, honestly. There's been some risers and fallers. Obviously, Just Sky Blink is gone, but the number one most
Is
played
there?
deck is still
Is there?
Boros.
I also love that on Goldfish, like the image they use for the Boros is still just Flage. Like
Yeah,
this is how you know what the deck is. It's the Flage deck, and there's no Flage in it anymore, obviously.
yeah, we
Okay.
gotta talk to
Thanks,
Saffron or
Goldfish.
someone over at GG
Get him on the
Goldfish about
horn.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just tweet at him and be like, who the heck is this guy? What the heck?
Yeah. Who come on, get your stuff together, guys.
Yeah, so the main thing is Boros Energy is still the number one most played deck online, around 10 to 11%, followed by
Why do you think
Affinity at
that is?
number
I'm
two.
gonna interrupt you really quick, Doug. Why do you think
Interrupted.
Boros is still the most played?
I think because
You
people
have a
usually online just like to play what they're comfortable with, and even though Flager's is gone, the deck still has legs. Its weaknesses are more glaring and more exploitable, but the
definitely.
metagame hasn't evolved quite in a way to punish it quite yet.
I think that's a good
I
point. I think it's a little bit of just how Magic Online exists and how it operates different from what paper tournaments are, right? We've talked about this time and time again. The combo
Mhm.
decks, the things that have these elaborate loops, you don't really do that on Moto. So if you're Boros, I'm not going to play against any of these like weird matchups that I'm, going to auto lose to or lose to. Some of that probably helps influence it, you think?
Yeah. Also, I think the reason why it's also doing well and like very popular is like people are still trying brand new things. Like I popped in the league for the first time in like
Yeah.
2 weeks yesterday, and I was playing against like random nonsense. I was like, "What is going on?" I was
That's
like
probably good too
reading
for it.
cards. I was just
I
like,
was like, I don't know what my opponent's putting on the stack here.
"Yeah,
Yeah, Boros kind of punishes just like, hey, I'm out here trying new stuff and innovating, and Boros is just like, I'm just trying to get you dead.
yeah." But
Good
no,
point.
but like we predicted, Affinity is still one of the top dogs as well.
Yep.
It's right
So
behind it,
Affinity's
number
at that two
two.
spot, moving
Mhm.
back to the list here.
Yeah, around 9 to 10%.
Yep.
Funny enough, it actually, according to some data I looked at on X, depending on how accurate that is, it's tied for the best win rate right now in the last 2 weeks on the winners metagame online, followed behind actually Gruul Scale. They both had the two best win rates around 54%. So that was kind of interesting. I kind of figured Affinity, like in a previous ban video. I felt like Affinity was going to be number one. It's number two. It's pretty close. I mean,
Hmm.
I try. I can't. I'm not a mind reader, but it definitely it and Boros are keeping a lot of fun decks away. A lot of decks trying
Yeah.
to dirtle, trying to get they require a lot of resources to get going. Those two decks definitely punish a lot. So that not very different from the meta that we were leaving before the ban happened, which is very interesting. So Goria's Vengeance has kind of made a little bit of a resurgence around 6 to 7%. Is it Prowess is back? That's one good thing about Flage being gone. Is it Prowess is able to thrive and actually be competitive against Energy, which is nice. We have
Yeah.
a new deck that kind of popped up after the ban, Grixis Reanimator, sitting around six
More on
percent,
that
which
later.
we'll go into like a deep dive about
Yeah,
that in
we'll
a
take a
second.
little closer look at that.
Yeah, because that deck's very interesting. And then we have Esper Blink at 5, Eldrazi at 4 with Chalices, Living End at 4%, which is kind of surprising. I thought it was going to be higher than that. Ruby Storm still staying around 4. Domain Zoo took a big hit at 3 points. Then we have
Yeah.
our boy Brute Scale on the up and up at 3%. Amulet Titan around 3%. The traditional red green Eldrazi around 3%. Belcher's sitting around 2. Zoria's Blink around 2. And then Yawgmoth around 2%, which is also a deck that kind of popped back up with Flage being gone.
Yeah, immediate big takeaways, which kind of already interrupted you with, was Boros still being at the top, still being very heavily played. Again, this is pulling from Magic Online data, so I think we've kind of outlined maybe a few reasons why that's there. And then the other big thing that kind of stuck out to me, like you mentioned, also was living in. I thought that we might see more of an uptick there on that deck, especially, against Boros Affinity, even maybe is it the prowess decks. Like, I feel like a well timed living in could be pretty good against those decks where you just get to kind of reset the board and use it as a wrath. It doesn't always have to be, oh, I put, 20 power toughness into play or something like that. Like sometimes you could just put a guy or two guys in as long as it's killing everything on your opponent's side of the board. Like that's still, a good card to cascade into. So
Mhm.
interesting to see that living in really hasn't held up to quite the hype, or just I don't know. Is it just maybe people are just being super duper prepared for it right now? And yeah, but those are my two immediate standouts. Just kind of looking at what Goldfish is showing us.
There's been a lot of number of like Dragon Magistrate running around and consigned memories to kind of fight the violent outbursts. So I feel like that's why it hasn't been able to meet its full potential. The deck is very good at dealing with artifact and enchantment based removal.
Mhm.
Stack interaction with wistfulness. So I could definitely see why if they're moving toward Trans Magistrate and other things of that nature, why it could be struggling to get off the ground.
Kind of a lot of Orm's Chance running around too, I suppose, right?
Mhm.
Like I feel like that's kind of a card that we're seeing in a lot of sideboards,
Yeah, there's
main
even
decks.
the blue white control deck with Orange Chant.
Yeah.
But you were saying that like some decks will kind of adapt to do that, adapt to beat Trans Magistrate, correct?
Yeah, so Vibrance is kind of what I've been seeing a lot of people talk about, or some of these deck lists, including Vibrance, as a way to fight the Magistrate and some of those other creatures that are, you only play one spell per turn kind of thing. Sometimes Vibrance can clean up some of that stuff, and the other half of what Vibrance is doing is going and grabbing your one copy of Misrise Village, so that you can make your Cascade spell uncountable into the baubles. So it kind of checks a couple of boxes for you. That's a card that I've been seeing in a few different packages what these living index are doing.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart adaptation.
Yep, for sure.
But again, like I think one of the things that we kind of highlighted but didn't quite bring to focus is that Affinity is the second most played deck, and historically that matchup is not great. And
Mhm.
the addition of a Violent Outburst doesn't solve that matchup for you.
I
They're
think
they're
that's
still
fair.
providing they're still providing a fast clock, and if they have the one consign or one counter spell when you're trying to Violent Outburst, they can kill you the next turn. If that deck is going to be number one, number two in that area, I could see it not being able to spike all these events. Also, with the like we said, there's a new deck versus Reanimator that's kind of popped up, and like you would against that deck, you have to have the endurance before you Violent Outburst. If they're going to arc on you and Oculus you, and you're going to fall
Yeah, they're gonna
behind.
have a good board as well to kind of fight through. Yeah.
A much better board, I would argue. Like a
Mhm.
9-day difference better board than you because you're like, here's my 5/5s, and it's like, here's an Archon, attack you, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and they get to have in a lot of scenarios, they get to have the first attack trigger, right? Unless you're doing specifically VO on their turn and then untapping and then you get to trigger. But, if it's Shardless Agent on your turn and they get to arc on you and then they get to attack first, I mean, your living in didn't really probably was not very effective for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think another thing that's kind of interesting. I think if energy continues to adapt and grow and be better, I could definitely see a world where it gets kind of Affinity can kind of get hated out by energy. I think the matchup for energy is still pretty decent, and if that becomes the case, then again, might be a good week by week deck choice, depending on what's going on from week to week. But that's something to keep an eye on as well, especially because there's still much room for energy to grow. There's a lot of things to try still.
Well, another good thing that maybe circling back to that idea that point we talked about with why is Boros hung around after losing a key card. It seems like all these white cards in the sideboard are super important, right? Having access to Wrath of the Skies, having access to Dranith or Orb's Chant have all seemed like they really have just they get to be a hammer for these different matchups. And Boros just gets to freely play those and it doesn't really hinder their primary game plan. So just having the ability to use some of these super powerful sideboard cards, these really strong hammers coming out of the sideboard. Maybe that's the reason why Boris has been able to kind of hang around.
100%. And again, it's like without Flage, the rest of the deck is powerful. It's just without Flage, you're more one dimensional. And I think
Mhm.
as the meta will evolve, that one dimensional might be a hindrance. But for now, all the signs say that it's still perfectly fine to play. I played a little bit myself. I think there's some room to grow, and we'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, we'll do a little deeper dive on that.
Yeah, I am happy to report that I was correct that Brute Scale was going to be on the up and up. It is a tech that is pretty decent against Affinity and some of the mid range strategies, and there's multiple ways you could play it. One of the Twitter personalities and Magic players I respect a lot, Toothy MTG, has been playing a lot of mono green Brute Scale. I think that deck
Mhm.
is very interesting. But there's been a lot of different Brute Scale decks coming around, and they've been kind of doing pretty well at events. So definitely excited to see that. I definitely felt like Flage was one of those cards that kept that deck out of the limelight. You know, and I'm glad
Mhm.
to see it in the meta because it's definitely a fun deck. And depending on your deck, can be kind of a headache to sideboard against because, like, are they going to go heavy into the Eldrazi package? Are they going to go heavy into the combo package? I love
Yeah.
decks that can do two different things and do it well.
Yeah, I think that's another good deck that gets to use some of these pieces in its main deck configuration that are really good in the metagame right now. We've talked about Vexing Bobble a lot. That's another deck that gets to play copies of that and
In the
getting to
main.
play the command. Command is such a good card, targeting
Yeah.
graveyards, kind of just being this Swiss Army knife, spell that does a lot for you. It's another good deck. And just having this like powerful combo, I think is obviously very, very strong. So yeah, I'd like to see that deck is around a little bit more. You said that Toothy's kind of been using this mono green version. Is there you have kind of a side of the fence that you've landed on, or have you may not, I guess, have enough reps on either side yet to have kind of an opinion yet? But what are we doing with the mono green one versus, I guess, what I would consider to be like the stock red green?
Well, in my opinion, the stock red green is more combo oriented and more combo oriented.
Hmm.
Its main game plan is the combo, but it also has the Eldrazi package as like a secondary plan, and
Yeah.
it also gets to play like main deck interaction and Holy Heat. Whereas like the mono green version is more of a ramp deck, and I feel like it does the Eldrazi package better than the combo. And when playing that
Okay. Gotcha.
version, it feels like I'm trying to Eldrazi first and then oops, here's my combo. Whereas when I
Okay,
play
that
red
makes
green,
sense.
it feels the opposite because I'm more
So they've
lower to
got
the ground.
more of a focus on doing Emrakul shenanigans, kind of as a is the
Mhm.
plan A, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, because most mono green lists now they run the four micro spawns, whereas like the red green version, they're playing the Chrysalis as their four
Hmm.
drop because it provides more spawns to combo when you're trying to when you're like low on mana.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
both decks are good. I think it's like kind of a meta thing. It depends on what your meta is going to feel like, which one's going to be better for the weekend. If you feel like you're going to be playing like more Eldrazi mirrors, like bigger mana decks, and the microspawn is a huge plus. But if you feel
Yeah.
like you're going to play against a lot of energy, I kind of lean towards the red green version. They might disagree, but I feel like having the whole heats really matter, especially when the mono green version only has like the four commands, like you said, in the main deck, whereas like the red green
Yeah.
version has those four and anywhere from 3 to 4 in holy heats. So it just depends on what you think. Personally, I think right now I'm pretty heavy on the red green, but I do get punished when I play the mirror match because they can just go bigger than you to destroy your mana, and then you kind of lose from there. So if you're trying to beat the mirror, I think the mono green version is better in the mirror and it gets the bigger decks.
Yeah, that kinda makes sense. It just kinda depends on what's in the rest of the room, right? Like, if it's
Mhm.
more Boros, then, yeah, it makes sense to want the access to the red cards, where if things are a little bit more Eldrazi heavy in your area, then, yeah, you probably wanna be on the mono green side because Micro Spawn and some of those other tools are much better in the mirror, so that makes sense.
And to that point, like the red green version can do the Eldrazi thing. It's just not as consistent as the mono green brute skill deck of doing the Eldrazi thing. So like I think the
Yeah.
red green deck just kind of covers your bases a little more.
Yeah. I was gonna say, let's hit one more deck here before we jump into a couple of the other decks that we've hinted at here that we want to do a little deeper dive on. The last thing I wanted to kind of catch before we move on was the prowess deck. That's another deck that it felt like it's, seems like it's doing fairly well. It's fairly well represented. I did play a little bit of it myself. Feels like mostly a strong deck, but also feels kind of pretty one dimensional, pretty beatable if you're kind of prepared for it. I guess I'll kind of open it up to you, what if you had any questions or what you thought so far of the prowess deck.
I think it's fine. Definitely a big upgrade with no Flage in the format. Like
Hmm.
your energy matchup is pretty 50-50, maybe even slightly favored depending on your build. But I think right now, I don't think there's enough combo decks or slower decks to really punish. I feel like a lot of the decks, especially online, are leaning towards like playing a lot of solitude, mid range piles. And I think historically the prowess deck kind of struggles against those decks, especially if they
Hmm.
have main deck answers to the Corey Steel Cutter. So
Yeah.
I'm kinda hesitant to play it. If I feel like Storm and a bunch of the combo decks are on the rise, 100%. but I think it kind of struggles in the mid range games. And even against Affinity, I'm kind of like on the fence because like some games you kind of blow them out of the water, but if they end up getting the Shadow Spear, can be kind of annoying to deal with. I also think there could be some innovation with the blue red prowess deck. I know some people have been trying to play the Boomerang Basics plus Storm Chaser's talent.
Yeah,
Some
I did
people have
not
been
try any
trying,
of that with
yeah,
the quick little run that I did, but
yeah. There's people trying that. There's people trying the like lessons toolbox sideboard with learn. There's a lot of people trying different things. Most of like the other stuff feels kind of cute to me. I think like the traditional just like kill them dead with slick shots have been very good. We even had a teammate try Secret Identity in that deck, especially with the
mhm.
rise of like Solitude decks as like a way to make sure your six shots stay alive. I think that card's pretty solid. But overall, I think it's fine. I don't like those kind of strategies too much. I usually don't lean
Yeah.
towards is it spells, unlike you. But I think it's a solid deck. But I think that's the biggest thing is that energy is not an auto loss anymore, and that's huge. And
Yeah.
if energy is not like an auto loss, then you have a good foothold into the metagame.
Like you said, I do think it's a pretty solid deck, but I do think it's fairly one dimensional, and you don't really have a pivot plan in the sideboard or some different stuff that you're really doing. Like maybe sometimes you have some Murktide to go like have a bigger threat that doesn't die to Fatal Push or something. I'm not really sure what that's solving. I don't really think that's like the plan I want. Obviously your plan that you want for these I need a pivot threat type thing is the Corey Steel Cutter, but a lot of people are prepared for this, right? In a couple of events that I played, I was getting mine consistently eaten up by March of the Otherworldly Light. Like that was the card that I kept seeing, and I was like, man, why do they have March main? That's really punishing me here because I feel like there's a lot of games where you landed on two and you're able to like keep making those browse monks. You're gonna just grind through the solitude stuff pretty easily, but that didn't happen when you're getting marched. So, that was kind of an interesting thing that I was a little surprised by, but it makes sense. I think a lot of the white mid range decks, the blink type variants, I think it's smart to adopt or add March. So makes sense to see that. But yeah, I thought that I was going to have a good time playing the deck and kind of really enjoy it, and I kind of felt like I didn't. It didn't really. It doesn't really feel like a powerful deck. Maybe
Yeah.
like you mentioned that if somehow things were just very combos and it's just like we're just goldfishing each other. Okay, maybe that's a better time to pick it up. I do feel like things are in the spot where people are still bringing a lot of spot removal. People are bringing Wrath of the Skies, which whatever they've got, they've got stuff to kind of help fight your little creature onslaught. And so yeah, it kind of didn't feel like the place to be right now for me.
Yeah, the Murktide tech, I don't see how it's good. Like the matchups you want it, like the traditional like grindy matchups, like they most of those grindy decks have Solitude or End of the
Yeah,
Hunt or something of that nature, and so your Murktide's gonna die regardless. So you just like it's not you're just adding more threats that die to the rule that they're already presenting.
yeah,
There's not like a control deck that or mid range deck that cannot deal with Murktide.
yeah. You want some kind of Corey Steelcutter adjacent type thing, right? This harder to answer permanent that keeps pumping out stuff, and maybe that should be a planeswalker. I don't know what that looks like,
Yeah.
but
If
anyway.
Ral was 3 mana, that would be perfect. That would be like the perfect thing.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's definitely something there that people need to explore. I'm not gonna give you all the answers,
Yeah,
but maybe they could try playing like a Season Pyromancer again, or maybe they can play the Saheeli, the 3 mana Planeswalker. That when you cast into sorceries, you get a guy. Maybe
yeah,
that's too crazy, but like something of that nature, something that could have incremental value, put a permanence on the battlefield to help you rebuild after, like you said, a Wrath of Skies, or just another thing that they have to have, like a March or a Celestial Purge or something to deal with, so the straight Corey Steelcutter can do its thing. Because when it's doing its thing and you're not being erased, it just feels fantastic. But like it's just kind of hard to do right now. But it definitely is still playable for sure. Definitely
yeah.
a
Definitely still
tier one
playable.
point five deck.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea. Just to kick back at it, I do kind of like the idea of the Saheeli Sublime Artificers, the card you're talking about. Whenever you and it is like a prowess trigger. It's whenever you cast a non-creature spell. It's not specifically into no sorcery. So when you play your Bauble, like you could play this on three, immediately play a Bauble, make a 1/1.
Sorry, I
But
didn't mean to offend you. I'm so sorry, boss.
well, it's okay. I'm here to make sure all of the Izzet cards are looked after and treat it responsibly. That's my mission here. No, but all seriousness, I mean, a planeswalker or something like that also kind of has like an interesting kind of dynamic, maybe where you get to copy your Ori Steel Cutter so that you get to make an extra monk somewhere along the way by by also casting spells. Maybe that's a direction you I don't know. Interesting idea, but, yeah, that's just kinda what I felt like with the Izzet deck, that you're very one-dimensional. If they're prepared for that, you're gonna kinda struggle, especially if they can answer your Silk Cutters, which it felt like a lot of people were prepared to do that.
Yeah, I also think the deck needs like a better answer to High Noon.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
a card
having
that's
to just
definitely running
play
around.
standard All-Star into the Flood Wall as my bounce spell to, like, solve that problem just feels kinda
Yeah, it's better in standard because like usually the Izzet deck is the only deck with multiple 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop spells. In modern, every deck has free spells. Every deck has interaction on turn 1, 2, 4. Can multi
yeah.
spell on almost every single turn. So like getting that one chance to like multi spell is not enough to equal
Yeah, yeah,
victory.
you
So
can't push that into an advantage like yeah. They'll just
yeah,
they'll have their removal spell, and then they'll untap, and then they'll play the High Noon again, and then you're back under that, and it's a tough place to be.
yeah. But definitely, Pro Tour's coming up. I know a lot of the people who are currently queued. There's a couple of them that like did very well in the last modern PT with Is It Prowess. So hopefully we'll see some innovation. Maybe
Yeah.
they're listening and they use Sahili. Probably not, but who knows?
I mean, it's definitely a deck that there's some room to grow there. Yeah. All right, well, let's jump over to this Grixis Reanimator deck. Let's do a little deeper dive on that before we jump into our last topic here. So, Grixis Reanimator, where is this coming from? What do we, new kid on the block here?
Yeah, I couldn't quite put who first played it. I do apologize, but it definitely popped up like the week of the banning. This Grixis Reanimator deck. It's really blue black, but it's splashing red for Faith is Splitting in the main deck, and then usually some form of board wipe slash meltdown on the sideboard. But
Hmm.
most lists are like your entire game plan is reanimating something. So it
Yeah.
plays 16 creatures usually, and give or take minus plus or minus 1 or 2 depending on the list, but the original lists were like 4 Emperor, 4 Psychic Frog, 4 Oculus, 4 Archons, and then your spell suite was like Persists and Unearths to bring back Archon and Oculus, Thoughtseize to fight their hand, Thought Scour to kind of fuel your graveyard, Fatal Push to interact, and then Spell Piercer 2 to protect the combo. But it essentially it's just constantly trying to discard a bunch of cards and reanimate everything that they possibly can.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty sweet. But speaking of one-dimensional decks, I think this deck kind of falls under that. The game one kind of game plan is very much hindering on the graveyard being around. And I think if someone has main deck graveyard hate followed by clock, i.e. affinity, that could be kind of rough. And then when I'm looking at a lot of these sideboards, they don't really have a secondary game plan.
Yeah, there's not really an option that they can transition to. Really, it's just try to protect our graveyard better.
But I think that's kind of crazy because like Psychic Frog works really well with like a Quantum Riddler kind of effect.
Hmm.
Is there no way that like you could like split a Quantum Riddler in the main deck or sideboard that kind of rely heavier on Frog
Yeah,
when they're
you
bringing in
could.
graveyard hate?
Yeah, I like the idea. I think Riddler is by far and away the best place to go to try to bridge the gap with a lot of this. We've already established that Frog and Riddler play well together, or not even well. I mean, I'm selling it short here. They're great together. So maybe you're trying to find a way to be a little bit better at doing that. Maybe it involves cutting Emperor Bones, and now we just have the Riddlers in the main deck, so we have two different divergent paths we can go our Frog Riddler plan, or we could do the reanimate plan, and then consign can tie the room together, something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of different directions that you can kind of go, but I guess just to also circle back really quick. This was a deck that had kind of been around for a little bit a while back, but never really got a place to hang out in modern. I guess it was kind of pushed out and never really, I guess, never just really landed on its feet. I guess.
Yeah, sorry about that. It was a known quantity, but not this more all in version. Completely like
Yeah.
this deck really sacrifices a lot of interaction for just being able to have redundancy and reanimation effects and be able to
Hmm.
make sure that its game one game plan is a success. Like there are 12 different ways to reanimate creatures, 8 ways to reanimate either Archon or Oculus separately. So, but again, you're sacrificing subtleties, force negations, things of that nature in the main deck because you're just all in on being consistently getting a gigantic threat out of your graveyard, which
Yeah.
which is both good and bad. Because again, it's good because you're more likely to win more game ones. You're likely to get your game plan going, but it makes you very one dimensional. So I could definitely see this deck kind of leading towards like more of a control variant, like kind of like maybe you do get rid of Emperor Bones or some number of Emperor Bones and some number of like Unearth, for example, and like play Tamios and Riddler and maybe some counter magic. I think there's a lot of room to grow, but if you're trying to beat this
Hmm.
deck, clock plus one form of one instant speed graveyard hate can usually get the
Yeah,
job
a nicely
done.
timed surgical will.
Yeah, but that has to be followed by a clock because this deck is very. I think this deck is very
It,
good at beating one form of like a one time graveyard hate if a fast clock is not presented because it's so redundant. There's so many moving pieces, but it does. I think it does struggle a lot against like a permanent graveyard hate, like a Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void, things of that nature. When I'm
mhm.
looking at lists, there's not a lot of bounce effects. There's not a lot of spell snare effects and null effects. So like this deck could very much struggle against a Rest in Peace.
Yeah, it's this deck is getting its edge by people sort of not being prepared for it, right? It kind of showed up after the ban and it's like, hey, I'm here to take up some of that meta share. People aren't really ready for me, and it got a little bit of buzz, through just results and some chatter on Twitter and stuff like that. So, I think it's a really cool deck. I do think there's some innovation. I think there's some room to grow here, but again, it is kind of struggling from that same thing we've talked about where I'm very one dimensional. If you're prepared for that this line of attack that it's presenting, it can definitely struggle. It doesn't, doesn't have a way to fight back. Like you land a rest in peace. Like, okay, what do I now I'm hope I get to 8 mana and cast my Archon.
Yeah. I think this also highlights one of the things that I've been kind of feeling in these last couple of weeks is that some of the stronger cards right now, like creature cards, are to me Frog and Riddler, and this is a very good use of Psychic Frog. So maybe I think this kind of pushes towards the like speaks to the power level of Psychic Frog right now. It's very hard to kill at times unless you have Solitude. But if you have other cards in your deck like Archon of Cruelty or Oculus, then it's kind of you could be kind of hesitant to get rid of the frog because if they reanimate that and you don't have the Solitude, you're kind of SOL. So I think that's probably where it's getting some points as well because maybe there's a lot of decks that don't have like good removal for it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's definitely a cool deck.
Yep.
I haven't played it personally. I played against it, and I have a couple friends
Yep.
that play it, and they say it's an absolute blast. And
Yep.
definitely, to go back to the mailbag question, I think this is a deck that can like definitely spike an RCQ. People
Oh
are
yeah.
ready for it,
Yeah, totally.
and and again, there's a lot of one-time graveyard hate right now, and the deck's so redundant it can fight through it. If this deck is something on your radar and you don't have Yex's Rest in Peace, Ghost Vacuum might be a good option for you as well.
Yeah, I've been saying it for a while that like I understand that this deck list that we're talking about here doesn't have Quantum Riddler in it right now, but one of the cards that I've been saying, I think that in this new version of Modern, one of the top 5 best cards in Modern right now is Quantum Riddler. Maybe that
Yeah,
list is even shorter, top 3. It is just the best card. We can have
I
that
think it
discussion
is.
at another time, but I'm, looking for decks that I can put Frog and Quantum Riddler in. Those are cards obviously I enjoy that kind of mid-rangey. My Frog is drawing extra cards, but I think Quantum Riddler is really like the thing that I'd like to see some of these decks try. So that I think that's if we were working on this, that's the kind of place that I would start to see if how do I incorporate Frog, Riddler, Consign in with the rest of this stuff. And I think another thing that this deck is doing well, we haven't mentioned yet, is Modern has been screaming for a deck to have Faithless Looting. I think Faithless Looting is a very strong, very powerful card,
Mhm.
and this deck is super duper using that card great. Like obviously, it's helping you churn through and giving you that redundancy, giving you the ability to find all of those pieces that you need, and just filling up the graveyard with the guys that you want to reanimate.
Yeah, but to kind of go back to your point, you said like Psychic Frog, Quadrill, they're one of the best cards, and I agree with you. I think that's also why Gore's Vengeance is like the third most played deck because those two cards are
Hmm.
just insane and work really well together.
Yeah.
And Goryo's is like a pretty good package to play along with them. Now, it's
Yes.
not
Yeah.
always the best package in my opinion. There's definitely some flaws to that deck. We'll get that to another episode, but I definitely think that we as a Magic community should be exploring different packages for Riddler plus Frog.
Riddler. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think it is a very, it doesn't really ask a lot of you. Like you can include those 8 cards and maybe a few other pieces that go around with it to kind of make sure that you're able to either consign the trigger or ephemerate, whatever, whatever you're doing. Heck, you could even do the blue card. What was the blue card that we tried a while back? That is just blink it in and out at instant speed. But a bad ephemerate, we'll call it. Not
Essence
important.
Flux?
Essence Flux, that's the one. Thank you for saving
We're
me.
not we're not playing Essence Flux, sweetheart.
I'm just
No,
saying, like, hey,
we're not playing
maybe you
Essence
don't have.
Flux.
I mean, you shouldn't. You shouldn't be playing Essence Flux unless you need consign number 5 and 6 for your
Yeah.
Riddler triggers, I guess. But something along that. Anyways, the point is, I totally agree that is a fantastic shell, and there should be more decks that we're exploring in those areas. But
Yeah.
let's go explore a different deck, and by a different deck, I mean the same old deck that we love and hate, and it's never left us. Doug doubted it, said it was dead, and
That's
here it
on
is, Boros Energy. It's still just lurking around. It's like a cockroach. You just can't kill it. What is Boros up to now, Doug?
I blame
How do you
Pyganti.
defend yourself?
I blame Pyganti. That
That's fair.
that that little Italian is just he keeps ramping up more and more deck lists and giving people hope. That son of a gun. No, but props to him and all the other content creators that kept playing this deck, keeping it alive with different
Hmm.
innovations. But one of the things I said at the top of this episode was that Boris is feeling more one dimensional, and that can be a occurring thing that could be a problem if exploited correctly. Essentially, the dex is pretty similar, minus the Flage, obviously, and we'll talk about some of the cards that they were kind of replacing Flage. Before we start with that, all these cards that we're going to discuss that people are trying, that we're seeing in winning lists and things of that nature, I think they all are worse than Flage because Flage
Oh
itself
yeah, yeah.
was a card that was a synergistic piece for the deck that synergized well with the deck because the life gain mattered with Ocelot Bride. It was a
Hmm.
way to rebuild off of board wipes when you were board wiped because it was something that went to the graveyard. You can cast back from the graveyard when your opponent's tapped out, and with Arena, be able to do a lot of damage. And it was just a value piece because it affected the board in so many different ways. It forced your opponent to play in a different way. I think all
Yeah.
these cards that people are replacing with it either meet one or two of the criteria that Flage did, and not all three. And so inherently, the deck is not as powerful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Boros had really, as a community, we had solidified that 58 out of 60 cards for the main deck. Like maybe you could argue there's 2 flex spots. Maybe it's really only 1 flex spot. It was really all you had as a flex up for debate, in the main deck.
Yeah.
So and a lot of that is because Flage was so good. So much of the deck is just very essential. It's just you sit down to register your Boros deck, you're locking in all of these cards, right? And big part of that is how everything that Flage does for you. It gives you the reach. It gives you, so you can get your opponent down to 10, and all of a sudden they're like, crap, 1 Flage attack, and I'm not, I'm dealt with.
Mhm.
It checked all the boxes, and I agree. Like, there's not a card that we have in Modern right now that checks all the same boxes that Flage does. So you're not going to have everything. You're not going to have all your cake and eat it too here.
Yeah. So one of the cards that people start playing their main deck that I find I'm going to start with this one because I think it's the most interesting one is
Mhm.
Boromir, Warden of the Tower.
Okay.
If people at home who are like, what the heck is that card? It's a 2 and a white
Lord of
for
the
a
Rings
3/3.
All-Star.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings All-Star. It's 2 and a white, 3/3 legendary human soldier. It's a 3/3 of vigilance. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. And then you could sacrifice it to give all your creatures indestructible, and then the ring tempts you. So this card is definitely just the main thing is that you need other resources for this card to be good. Right. Yes, it can counter like evoked solitudes, evoked elementals, and like cascaded spells, which can be nice. But the fact that like it doesn't synergize with the deck, it doesn't give you life gain. It doesn't give you bodies for Ocelot Pride or Gum of Apartment. It's just a 3/3 vigilance. No other keys besides for like protecting your board. It
Yeah.
seems kind of weak to me. The ability to protect yourself from Wrath guys is great, but it's not a main deckable card in my opinion. I think this is definitely a very good sideboard card, a very good sideboard option, especially against control variants, living in and that kind of stuff. But it's just too lackluster in my opinion for the main deck.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the general theme with a lot of these cards, that we're obviously just not going to be impressed with them, and we're not going to be really happy having to adopt them into our Boros decks. But, it does have some interesting text. If you are in a spot where you draw it late after you do have a big board, now you're like, okay, well, I could push even further. I could push harder I don't have to be worried about my opponent top decking Wrathless guys, right? Like you get to the spot where you're like, okay, I'm holding back. I'm holding back. I'm holding back. Okay, they haven't wrath me. There's no way they can have wrath. Now you draw this, and you're like, I don't have to hold back anymore. They can't. There's some good things about it. Obviously, some bad things about it. Yeah, it's 3 mana, 3/3 that doesn't really have any other text. If you don't have a board, if you're not already doing something, it doesn't get you to the next thing. It's just like, hey, I'm a
Yeah.
3/3. I'm here.
Yeah.
Attack and block as I go.
If I get board wiped or they answer my board and I draw this, I will concede the game.
I will
It
be
just
crying. I will
I will be crying at the table.
be
They'll have to call a
crying and
judge. Yeah. But no, this card has a lot going for it. But right now, I can definitely envision myself playing in the sideboard, but the main deck, not quite yet.
yeah.
I think the other card that people, I think, naturally went to after Flash got banned was the
Yeah.
Legend of Roku.
Yeah,
Because that was
that's the main
already,
deck card that I think a lot of people are gonna be thinking of when you start thinking, "How do we replace those spots in Boros?"
yeah. And Roku kind of fits a lot of the questions, right? It does help you get ahead when you're behind, stay ahead when you're ahead, but it kind of doesn't affect the board the way the Flage does. But I definitely
Yeah.
think I'm kind of happy with playing 1 to 2 of these in the board, depending on the meta. My main concern I have with Legend of Roku's in the main deck is that it is 4 mana, and a lot of lists have been getting kind of lean, going down to 22 lands and getting more aggressive. And Legend of Roku is kind of asking you to do the opposite. So when building your energy deck, you kind of have to ask, do you want to be more mid-rangey or do you want to be more aggressive? If you want to be more aggressive, then I think this is a sideboard option like it was in the past. But if you're trying to be more grindy, then I could definitely see this as a 1 or 2 of. I think this card is great, and we've already talked about it in past podcasts and in our video on our Metafy, how synergistic it could be with the deck. So I'm pretty happy with playing 1 to 2 of these. What about you, Jason? How do you feel about this card right now?
Yeah, I think the first question you have to ask is, what is the metagame forcing me to do with my Boros deck? Do I need to be more aggressive? Do I need to be more grindy? And I think that's kind of what you're first trying to solve. And I think the answer in general is I'd rather lean to being more aggressive, more just be faster, right? And so
Mhm.
in general, I'm not very interested in this for my main deck. I just don't think that's where I want to be. I want to be applying pressure. I want to be forcing my opponent into tough spots where they have to figure out how to answer me. I think that's the best way to sort of approach most of your game ones as the Boros deck, right? Where deck
Yeah,
chock full of 1 drops, trying to drag out the game with some Rokus in game ones just doesn't really fit that, right? Like I think you really want to I think it's extremely important to pick the spots where the Legend of Roku is at its best and then do that in the sideboard games. Your game ones,
yeah.
I just don't think you can just, hey, here's a known good card. Let's just shove it in our main deck. Like that's not what this is doing. And then, so
My counter to that would be if you did expect a lot of mirror matches, if you think Boros Energy is still going to be the most played deck, I don't think this is horrendous to have in the main deck.
yeah,
And,
that's fair.
and
That's a good point. That's a good point. If you think Boros is, 20% of the room for you, okay, cool. I'm way more on board. But
yeah,
if it's 10% of the room and there's a lot of different stuff happening, no, I'm not touching it.
yeah. So
Leave it in the
so
sideboard for me.
so if you felt like if the meta went towards more of a solitude blink kind of package, would you be more interested in this kind of effect?
I think I could
Like,
see that. Yeah.
yeah,
I think if the more Overlord of the Belmerk Blink stuff, then I'm more on board with this for sure. But
yeah,
if there's I'm getting is it prowess over here, I'm getting, some other combo deck. Yeah, I think you're just getting pulled in too many directions right
yeah,
now,
yeah. And like we said, that
Eldrazi
too.
over here.
Yeah, and like we said, deck 2 and deck 3 right now are the Affinity deck and Goryo's, and I don't give a care about this card.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah, maybe it's not as good as I thought going into. It's definitely a good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So moving on to the next card, I'm think I might be a little bit more excited about this one just because the mana investment is so much less. So how do you feel about Philia, Exuberant Shepherd? I think most of us know 2/2 flash. When it attacks, you can exile something. You know, what do you think Philia's role could be, or how do you see that moving into the Boros?
So in Boros, I think it's not that great because again, it's one of those cards like Boromir that you need other cards for it to work. And the two mana like spot is kind of glutted right now because people are going up to 4 voice victories and your Johnny's bombardments, things of that nature. But I definitely think it's definitely a card that I would be interested in if you did splash another color. There was a deck that top forward one of the challenges recently by one of the friends to the podcast, Nico Ferrigno, who is essentially just Boros Energy with 4 Riddlers. And that kind of deck, I would be very happy to play Felia because in just base Boros, it can get rid of blockers and maybe re-flicker a Fable or a Season Pyromancer, and that's kind of like medium. Being able to scam a Riddler on turn 3 is something I'd be very intrigued in. And like adding Riddlers to an energy deck is also kind of intriguing because the deck kind of doesn't mulligan very well at times. And adding something like Riddler immediately makes your deck mulligan a lot better, a lot smoother because like you can mull a 5 with less of a chagrin, less malice and anger at the world because you have Riddler in your deck. But I think without a value cards like that, Felia doesn't have enough value for me and does enough. There, you don't have consigns and Boros to be able to like have it be an effective removal spell, and so I'm not too high on it. But I would like to curious why you're very high on it.
Yeah, this is I guess I'll kind of take us through this tangent because one of the things I wanted to talk about when we get to the Boros is what we talked about weeks ago, which is adopting another color. I think that's the direction that maybe Boros is going to really settle into. Before we were really restricted by we need to have our Flage, we need to have our arena, and there we didn't need to get outside of red white. Now we have a lot more flexibility and we can and maybe we should be not just Boros, right? And so I'm way more interested in splashing and having access to something else like black or blue. It seems like the best places to go. So if I'm interested in exploring that direction, I think failure becomes more exciting. Like you said, exactly with the Quantum Riddler, which circles back to our earlier point. Probably just the best card in modern, if not the best, but definitely in that top tier of best cards in modern. I want to adopt that in all of my decks probably somehow. So, once you get to that line of thinking, okay, I've got my Boros deck, I want to somehow add Quantum Riddler in there and I need it to make sense. Maybe Felia is the way that sort of bridges the gap with everything and kind of helps explain how we got here, maybe, or just connects all the dots for us so that our deck looks a little bit more cohesive. So
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of what I'm
definitely
thinking.
yeah, I definitely think that deck bridges the blink package and the energy package very nicely. But I think if we're just talking strictly Boros, I don't think it's a very good
Yeah,
card.
that's fair.
But
Totally fair.
to your point, there's the newer version of energy. There's a blue white energy deck, which is pretty much just blue white blink with the energy package, Guided Souls, and Slap Ride.
Mhm.
So you're foregoing Bombardment of Johnny for Felia Solitudes and Quantum Rulers. And that deck's been very intriguing.
Yeah,
I don't think the deck lists are quite there yet. Again, I think a lot of these deck lists, besides for like Affinity and Titan, need some more polishing
yeah,
overall and more innovation. But to that point, Felia is an all star in that deck because you're a blink deck that can also just like, oops, I can kill you with a synergy package on turn 4. So that
yeah.
deck's very intriguing. Some of those cards in that deck I think are kind of stinky. I think Starfield Shepherd is a little stinky in general compared to the other Warp Thread and Quantum Riddler. So I think there's some innovation there. But short answer is Felia and Boros, Boo, and any other energy variant with a third color.
Color variant, maybe, yeah, passable.
Yeah. There's also been people trying Halaya, Guided by Light, in their
Mhm.
energy decks.
Speaking of warp options.
Yep, it is another warp card. It's definitely very synergistic. So, like, the life gain matters with Ocelot Pride. The only problem is a
It is
3/3 for 3 is not
kind of
fantastic.
boring by itself, but if you
Mhm.
are doing, I've got pieces moving around, I'm triggering it, I've got some 1/1s, I'm doing some Ocelot Pride shenanigans with it, it could be pretty enticing, especially for 1 mana, right? Like, I can get
Yeah.
some life and a card back for a low investment is I could see where that's enticing for sure.
I think if you're going towards a more aggressive version, this card definitely is more intriguing. But definitely by itself, from behind, it's very underwhelming. But if you can present a fast clock with like Ocelot Pride, this card can really help you win more. But overall, I'm just again like a lot of the cards we discussed. I think overall it's kind of weak by itself and in the late game.
Yeah, that's kind of some of the problem that we're seeing. A lot of these
Yeah.
things is if you're doing a lot of the stuff, if you're having the pieces kind of fall together, yeah, this card's great, right? I'm guide pride plus my Halia, and things are I'm happy and everything's great, but when you've been wrathed and you draw Halia, you're like, okay, well, I have a 3 mana 3/3.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you were saying that you want to be more aggressive in your game ones, and this card I could definitely see being more aggressive and more synergistic, and so maybe people would be more happy playing the main deck. But
Hmm.
I think the fact that it's weaker by itself, I'm kind of against it. But if your thought process is to just be all in game one, then I could definitely see it making the cut over like a Roku or Felia.
Yeah. I guess it's mentioned a couple other cards here. What do you want to start with? We've got Ranger, Fable, maybe a couple other things, a few other things that people are sprinkling into the mana base. You have a big one of those that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean those are pretty stock. Like those are cards that were like in and out of the main
Kind
deck,
of
even
floating
when Phase
around
was
already.
around. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's been a downtick in Season Pyromancer because you don't need to be filling your graveyard as heavy. So people have been moving towards Ranger, Captain of Eos, especially because it's like ability to help you in the combo matchups and Fable. because
Yeah.
Fable is a really good card in the mirror, especially in the Boros mirror. It gives you 2 red permanents for Johnny. When you flip, you can make tokens of Ocelot Pride and have 2 Ocelot Prides going off, and
Go
that's kind
crazy.
of crazy.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a very good card in the mirror, and if you're not focusing on filling your graveyard, it makes total sense why people are going towards Fable. It is kind of slower though, so it's again a question
Mhm.
of do you want to be aggressive versus do you want to be mid-rangey? It's just one of those things. I think it's a nice one or two of. I still think Seasoned Pyromancer is still the best for aggression, and then Ranger
Yeah.
Captain is second just because of its ability to keep you alive against combo decks. But again, if you felt like you were going to play against Boros, sign me up for Fable. Fable shenanigans all day. That was the only part of Pioneer that I liked was playing Fable the Mirror Breaker.
Well, Fable's a fantastic card, so I can't be mad at you for that. It does really toe the line really well at being. I can add some bodies to the battlefield. I can help you fill up your graveyard. I can help you sort through stuff. It kind of does a lot.
Yeah. Also, with Flage being gone, Arena's kind of on the downswing. Usually, most lists are playing 0 to 1. A lot of people are going to Delvoke and Encampment, which we talked about in a previous Boars video. I think that card's still fine, but I do like having value lands in my Boros deck. So people moving towards
Definitely.
it makes total sense to me. I know we're really running out of time. I just wanted to mention one other energy deck that I found interesting because we talked about blue white, we talked about Jessica, we talked about Boros,
Yeah, we
but
mentioned the Black Splash. Yep.
yeah, Mr. Misplaced Ginger keeps playing this Mardu deck and top winning slash top fouring slash top eighting events with it. I think this deck is interesting. My only concern is that like if you splash blue, Quantum Riddler I think is one of the strongest cards right now in the format, like we've said over and over again on the podcast. So it
Yeah.
makes sense to make your mana worse for a card like that, but making your mana worse for like Bowmasters and the
Nail
Chthonian
pushes.
Nightmare is not. It doesn't seem as powerful. Chthonian Nightmare does have its moments, but it's not inherently a powerful card like Riddler is. It's not insanely powerful in every situation like Riddler is, and it doesn't really work well with some of your cards. So it kind of feels like
Uh,
a win more card. The only cards I really like in black that really like make me want to play black is Thoughtseize in the sideboard and Into the Hunt. I think Into the Hunt is an insanely powerful removal spell right now if people are leaning on Riddler and Kappa Cannon.
I want to push back on two things really quick. I actually think that Chthonian Nightmare is a very powerful card. I do think that now there's some caveats on that, right? You need to be able to access your graveyard regularly, and so depending on how much living in and surgical extractions and whatever other random stuff is running around, that can put a big damper on what you're trying to do with Nightmare.
Mhm.
However, if you are just able to just keep nightmaring pretty regularly, you're going to win the game. I think. I think just being able to a Johnny consistently I'm going to keep presenting a Johnny's and bombardments, and you're going to have to figure out how to answer all of them. I'm not going to run out of the ability to keep doing that. Same thing with
Yeah.
Guide Pride. Like I'm going to continue to get to City's Blessing and keep pumping out tokens and finding ways to just keep overwhelming your like one for one removal, right? So if you're approaching that game as some sort of one for one type thing, I think Nightmare is going to really succeed in a lot of those spots. And so that's a card that actually excites me a little bit about what the potential with some of the Mardu stuff is. I agree. One of the really smart points you made was points that I really kind of want to emphasize is, what are we doing to our mana base, and is it worth is the juice worth the squeeze? Right, double blue on Quantum Riddler that might be not very feasible in a lot of spots. Right, you may be introducing new problems that you don't really need or want. Nightmare being a single black is maybe a little bit more manageable, but is it really single black? Because the what you want to be able to do is be able to cast it multiple times in a turn. And so
Yeah.
now when you think of it that way, now okay, now I need double black or triple black. You are putting a lot of tax on your mana base.
Yeah, I see this as a 4 drop most of the time because
Yeah,
like
that's
they
fair.
get great value out of it. You need to play it twice. So I personally think I've tried more of the Mardu than I have the Jeskai. And I so far my initial thought is I don't think making your mana worse is worth
Yeah,
the Chthonian
fair.
Nightmare. But I want to emphasize that I think End of the Hunt is a very good Magic the Gathering card and very good removal for
Yeah.
the current meta.
If people
And
don't know, End of the Hunt is something you should have on your radar. 2 mana sorcery, target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value among planeswalkers or creatures they control. This card is fantastic. It exiles it. It doesn't target. You can't ephemerate around it. It gets rid of your ward from your Kappa Cannoneers, and it breaks up the combo from the 5-color deck with the Scion and Draco. So
Yeah.
End of the Hunt is fantastic. Like you mentioned, that's a card I'm actually excited to have in my sideboard, along with the Thoughtseize, as you've already mentioned.
Yeah. So those cards I like. The Nightmare, I'm still not quite impressed with it. I keep finding myself in situations where like I don't have my Johnny got solituded or something of that nature, and I'm like kind of spinning my wheels. So I
Uh-huh.
don't know. It's to be. I think there could be more to this deck because again, like we keep saying, that sideboard configuration is A+, but the main deck is not quite where I want it. There
Mhm.
might be a world where you do kind of like a Blink a hybrid like Jeskai does, and maybe you do play Overlord to make your Chthonian Nightmares better. And then if you're doing that, you're adding Felia. Maybe that's an avenue you can explore.
Yeah,
You would
I
have
can
the
see that.
cuts, but I also think Bowmasters is not 100% very good right now. I think it's good against energy, and it can be good against some of the Riddler decks, but like
Yeah,
against the
it's not an all-star, right?
it it doesn't apply the pressure that I want it to when playing Boros. When playing Boros, I want to be very aggressive, and Bowmaster is not the most aggressive card.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that really summarizes it right there for me. Is so many of these cards, the lens that we're looking through is it doesn't really fit this aggressive play style that we want Boros to have. What
Mhm.
Flage gave us, none of these cards have that, and so we're just kind of like, no, I don't want this. It doesn't do the thing that we want it to do. And maybe that's where we need to kind of maybe step back and just reevaluate what Boros's role or game plan should be. Maybe it's no longer going to be this aggressive deck. Maybe it is going to be this super grindy, weird mid-range deck that can have some aggressive draws, but is more built on trying to assemble some sort of like subtle combo with whether that's through Felia or some kind of thing with the Nightmare. I don't know, but I would say that's kind of the thing that I picked up on. That's we've kind of echoed multiple times here. Is just that
Yeah.
it doesn't fit that aggressive game plan that we want to have in game one.
Yeah. So yeah. So to kind of summarize, I think that's a great point, and I think maybe because the way Affinity is right now, kind of keeping the combo decks at bay. Maybe you don't need to be aggressive, and you can just play mid range. Maybe that's why people are having success with Roku's and Boromirs and things of that
Hmm.
nature. But if the format switches into more combo heavy, then I think the deck would have to change inherently from what it is now.
Yeah, yeah, you'd have to see a lot of changes, I think, for sure. All right, well, why don't we wrap it up there? I think that's kind of most of the stuff that we wanted to hit. Any other kind of last parting thoughts here for you, Doug?
No, I think the bans were not as bad as we thought they were. I think we kind of overreacted. I mean, we are
By
making
we, you
content
mean
after all. Me?
not we.
We both overreacted. But
Sure.
overall, I think the bans were pretty decent. I wish
Yep,
Boros wasn't the most played deck still. I think a lot of people wish that because people are kind
same.
of tired of playing against Boros. I personally love Boros mirrors, and since Flage has been gone, I haven't lost a Boros mirror. Just so I think the meta is in a decent spot. I think there's a lot of more room for innovation. I think
Yeah,
we're going to see that in the PT. And but
yeah,
I have some more hope than I did a month ago about modern.
that's good.
So let's just say
I,
that. So
I think modern is looking pretty fun. I think there's still, like we always say, there's more innovation. There's more stuff to try out there. Go do it. Do your homework. Go try some stuff. Have fun.
um,
Try different cards, just go. I think that's what it looks like to me. Modern looks fun. I think it is a little annoying that Boros is still the largest chunk of the room, and that's a little frustrating, I guess, because we definitely wanted to see that shake up a little bit more. But again, I think the bands were good, like you said. I'll again agree with you there, echo that. So I'm happy. Let's keep playing modern. It's fun. Yep. All
thank you
right.
for watching. We're back, baby, and we're gonna be back on a weekly basis.
Yes.
Our love for
Yep.
Magic is back. Our love for competitive Magic is back. Thank you for bearing with us. But Jason and I really needed that because, like, if we would have kept going the way we were going, we would have quit the podcast. We would have quit Magic. So we really needed that break. So
Yeah.
appreciate you
Burnout
guys.
is real for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for hanging on with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you being here. Like Doug said, we can't do this without you. We want to be here. We're here to keep pumping out some episodes for you guys. So we'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you so much. One last final shout out for their sponsors because we can't do this without them as well. To appreciate everything that the Mana Vault and Kangaroo Tales does for us. Love you guys. Love you listeners. Take care of each other out there. See you next time.
Bye.